Good morning, Denver Startup Weekers. As we continue to blaze on the awesome day 2 of Denver Startup Week, the panels just keep getting better. If you joined us for our last panel, the Power Potential with Ryan Lavarnway, hopefully you enjoyed his incredible words. But it's building and getting more awesome as the day goes on. Our next session, we have 2 incredible leaders that are going to be talking about the impact of business and the impact of social good through business, which I'm really, really excited about. The panel being moderated today by our very own State of Colorado, Phil Weiser, our Attorney General. Let's give Phil something. He's the best. I'm going to tell some top secrets about Phil Weiser. Before Phil Weiser was the Attorney General and has been leading our state through some of the most challenging discussions and dialogues to make sure that as citizens, we have the best Colorado that Colorado can be. Phil led the Silicon Flatirons Entrepreneurial Center up at CU Boulder and is one of our godfathers of all things startup community. He brought together Denver, Boulder, Colorado Springs, and Fort Collins for the first platform called Startup Colorado. He's the secret behind the Bridge Entrepreneurs Web Network and really worked to bring $3 million into the state to build the biggest Blackstone entrepreneurship initiative to bring entrepreneurs together in history. And he's an entrepreneur's entrepreneur, and he spends his evenings and weekends as the AG, making sure that we're all taken care of and the state is better for it. With him, we have Seth Sternberg. I'm going to let Phil give Seth's background. Seth joined us from California. His company that he founded called Honor is one of the leading healthcare businesses in the world. We're really, really lucky to have another unicorn in our state, but Seth has been incredibly active, and why this discussion is so vital is that Seth not only operates his company day to day, but Seth truly cares about our state. He deeply dove in on the artificial intelligence legislation and led a very small group of entrepreneurs that went to the governor and said, Governor, the solutions for artificial intelligence in the state are not what they need to be for companies like ours. Seth and a small group of leaders convened the governor, held a special session, and are in the process of negotiating and revising what's going to be our Colorado statutes for artificial intelligence. And it's Seth's leadership and his horsepower that brought those leaders together to really do that. And so this is an incredibly special discussion between 2 awesome leaders, and I'll turn it over to Attorney General Phil Weiser to do the honors. Phil?
First, get this mic on. Mic 1.
How about this?
How's this? Not as good? Use that one. Try your magic.
All right, that's a little bit different. It is great to be here. Can we give Eric, the founder of Denver Startup Week, a big round of applause? I was in the room with Eric, Nancy Phillips, and others when Eric said, how about we do a Denver Startup Week? Boulder has one. We can do one here in Denver. It was then built, this is starting 2011, that conversation. First time they did it was 2012, built into one of the very largest startup weeks in the whole world. And one of the critical points, and it's very similar to how Eric introduced Seth, to be a leader in this community, you don't have to ask permission. You just have to do something. And others will join with you. That's the spirit that clearly Seth embodies. We're so fortunate to have him here. He has founded now 2 great companies. The first one, Mibu, he sold to Google. He's been a very successful Googler. Do they still say that, Googler? Googler. And here he is the founder and CEO of Honor, which is, as he puts it, redefining the aging journey and providing access to senior care, a critical need in our society. We'll talk a bit about his company and his idea about entrepreneurship. And I want to start by working to give entrepreneurship a good name. And let me put in another category some of the companies I get to see up close as Attorney General, companies like Juul and Purdue Pharma. Both Juul and Purdue Pharma were founded on a basic idea. What if we prey on people, make money, and we can get away with it before things finally come to an end? That business model is what you might call predatory capitalism. And it's my job to prevent it from happening, to address it when it happens, and to protect people. we actually have to be vigilant to address predatory capitalism so we can allow for responsible, ethical capitalism. Because if you allow companies to take shortcuts, to harm people and get away with it, life is not fair for those companies who are operating ethically and responsibly. This is not actually a hypothetical point. There's a real hazard that happened in the late 1990s when a company called WorldCom was engaging in fraud, and its competitors were being punished for not performing as well as a fraudster. And that had a lot of collateral consequences. If you want to give entrepreneurship a good name, what I would say is it's about solving problems and making people's lives better. Think about Reed Hastings, a great entrepreneur, who didn't like having to pay late fees and founded a company, Netflix, that's been incredibly successful. Or, of course, what Steve Jobs did at Apple with the iPod and then iPhone, creating huge opportunity. So, Seth, as you think about entrepreneurship and think about this lens of entrepreneurship for good, what definition do you offer and what thoughts can you offer about the whole enterprise?
Yeah, totally. And actually, I have a request. If it is possible to turn off the overhead projector, that would be awesome. But that's for the AV crew over there. If the overhead projector can get killed, but if not, no problem. Trying. Okay, so I started my first startup when I was 24 years old. My first real one. By real, I mean I worked hard on it. I partnered with engineers, so it was two at the time, just graduated from undergrad at Stanford. Then I was like the business guy. And the problem that we ended up solving was something that we cared about at 24 years old. And what that was web messaging. It was like, just in that day, there was no real-time anything on the web browser. You had to use software to do stuff like instant messaging. We thought that was dumb, and we wanted in a web browser to be really easy to get. So we built this thing called Meebo. It got really big really fast. 7 years later, we sold it to Google. Now, why did we sell it to Google 7 years later? And the reason is, at year 5, I was so very done with that company. I no longer cared. So we had like 200 employees. We had like $50 million in revenue, and I no longer cared as a CEO. You didn't say that publicly. I didn't say it publicly at the time.
Wouldn't be a good idea.
No, at the time, I was quiet about it, but now I'll be louder about it. Now, why did I not care? And the answer is, I did not feel like we were fundamentally changing the world for the better for like millions of people. We're making millions of people happy. We were reaching half of the internet population monthly. And we were making people happy, but we weren't fundamentally improving their lives. So when we got acquired by Google, almost immediately, we went into what are we going to do next mode. It took like 4 months at Google to realize that we weren't going to be the big company people. And we had 3 rules. Look a human in the eye and know that you will make their life fundamentally better. Rule 2, it has to be an idea that ultimately will serve millions of people and make millions of people's lives better. Rule number 3, it had to be a very hard problem. And it had to be hard because in our case, we were second-time founders. We knew how to raise money. We knew how to put a team together, build a company, so we could work on an extra hard problem. And the reason that this was so important, those 3 rules were so important, is that we knew what it was like to go launch a startup, which is hard no matter what, and you have to keep running through brick walls. Show of hands, how many of you have actually launched a startup? How many of you want to launch a startup? Okay. So those of you who've done it, you know what I'm about to say. Those of you who have not done it yet, you're going to find out. You're going to smack like 10 brick walls. And it turns out that when you smack a brick wall, it really hurts. And like literally the #1 differentiating factor between the founding team that launches an idea that succeeds and changes the world and the founding team that doesn't is if that team is good at hitting brick walls and getting back up and keep going. And 10 of them, successively. So we wanted to work on something that would give us the internal energy to want to just get up and keep going and push through all those really big problems.
How long was it before you developed those 3 rules?
So those 3 rules, we actually, we were sitting in a conference room waiting for the final docs to come on our sale to Google. And we put up literally, we start just writing on a whiteboard everything we should have done different, everything. And it was like, how to hire, stuff about how do we hire people, how do we hire senior people, how do we manage the company, how do we raise money, who do we raise money from? Like, we had this massive list. And when you pared that list down, like, those 3 rules came out of it. Because this energy thing is so important. And so what I would argue for you, and we're going to talk more about this today, you all need to figure out internally for yourself, what are the rules you have to create and hold yourself to them? Where if you start a company that fits those 3 rules, you will push. You will get up and keep going. You will have more energy than every other person. And I hope, and this is the other thing that I'll say, and we'll move on to the next question, you all, by virtue of sitting in this audience right now, have shown that you have some level of energy. Congratulations, that matters. You're here. You're trying. Good. Okay. You get to choose how you use that energy. Are you going to use that energy to work on a for-profit, startup thing that makes the world a fundamentally better place? Or are you going to work on a for-profit startup thing that actually doesn't really make the world a fundamentally better place? Maybe it makes money. Maybe it does something over here that's important for technology or whatever, but it doesn't really fundamentally change the world. And
So
yeah.
Purdue Pharma, what is it? Chloe Close? Hand off the bottom of the mic. Okay.
Don't hold the antenna.
Don't hold the antenna. Okay. So 3 makes the world worse, Purdue Pharma. It's fine. It's neutral.
Yeah.
It makes the world better. Are you saying with the benefit of hindsight, your first startup was kind of
Neutral.
Neutral.
It was in the middle. And I think, in those ones that make the world worse, you all can use your energy in startups or outside of startups, frankly, to make the world worse, and I see it all the time. Like, you see people in functions, in businesses, doing things that really are detracting, forget about economic value. They're detracting societal, social value. They're not moving us forward. And then you see these other people, and you think, wow, I so respect what you are doing because you are fundamentally moving the world forward. And I think that you can do it through startups. I think you can do it through for-profit enterprise. I think you can do it at nonprofits. I think you can do it in government, right? Startups and for-profit enterprise have the advantage that if you figure out how to make money and make the world a better place, then you can take the money that you're making and keep recycling it into more innovation. And you have an innovation machine that never dies because you are making money as you improve people's lives. And then you get this recursive cycle of constantly making more people's lives better over time. That, to me, is pretty awesome.
What was your undergraduate major?
Political science.
Because what is striking me is what a thinker you are about the enterprise you're doing. Did you feel like you got most of that from having done it once looking back, or were you constantly thinking about it as you went in the first startup and it was cumulative?
Yeah. 24-year-old entrepreneur is hard for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is you probably haven't figured out what actually matters to you yet in the world. And the other is you simply do lack a lot of experience about the way things work. And so the version of me that was then 33, I think, when we did Honor, had all of this experience to be able to reflect on. And so that did change my perspective on how do you build the right company. I learned enough and saw enough. And you can do that either through launching a company. Like, we were lucky / worked really hard and got a great exit to Google. Okay. But you could also go, join a Series B startup right now that's crushing it and learn from being inside there and then start your own company at, whatever, once you have some more experience.
You've already leaned into this, so I'll ask it. And for those who haven't read the book, Simon Sinek, Start With Why, the idea is it's important to have a why, to have a broad vision for why you do what you do. Honor, your mission is to change the way society cares for older adults. And you have spoken openly that your own mom's experience is part of what motivated you to found the company. Walk us through those through lines. You came with those founding rules, and then you found this particular why for this company. How'd that work?
Yep. So once you have created the rules that you want to live by, it's hard to actually find the company that's going to be successful. A trick is, let's say that you really care about creating a profit engine so that you can reinvest in innovation, which I would argue is literally like the defining feature and benefit of launching a world change startup. There are lots of disadvantages we can also talk about, but that's one of the core advantages. You cannot launch a startup that's going to fail on the business side. You can't launch a mediocre startup on the business side. You have to believe that it's going to be an amazing business, and you have to believe it's going to be an amazing societal outcome. And so we spent 18 months working on what would our startup idea be. And the idea that we had before Honor that we never launched, we called, it was a terrible name, I'm not a marketing person at all, Labor API. And the idea of that was basically lots of people in service jobs are not rewarded for doing a good job. How could we change the world so that they can do a good job and be rewarded? That was the basic idea. And the more that we dove on that, I walked into True Blue, I walked into, what's that, the other big day labor. I walked into our local government's day labor pickup spot. I talked to the guys on the street and literally in front of the corner by my apartment, went down and chatted with them about what their lives were like. Their lives are really fundamentally unfair in so many ways. The problem was we had a societal problem that I and the other co-founders really cared about, and we could not find a business solution. Just couldn't do it. And so we had to shelve the idea, even though we really didn't want to. But when I literally just flew over to Connecticut, and my mother picks me up at the airport, and she's driving me home from Bradley to our home in West Hartford, she's driving really slowly. And I'm like, Mom, why are you driving so slowly? And she's like, well, driving is harder than it used to be. And that's all it took to freak me out, because I remember a out west trip in Montana when she got a speeding ticket in Montana. Do you guys know how hard it is to get a speeding ticket in Montana? It's virtually impossible, and she did it. So to see her driving slowly totally freaked me out, and that's how I started to go down this path of what can we do for older adults. And the thing that's cool about working on how do we make the world better for older adults is that we can also make the world better for those who care for them. There are 3.8 million personal care aides in the United States of America. We went and interviewed 50 of them before we ever started the company, and it was not unlike interviewing the day laborers. It was really similar. And so when we launched Honor, we literally coined the term care professional, care pro, and we said that's what these personal care aides are going to be called in our world, because they are professionals, and we're going to start by calling them what they are. And then the second thing we coined internally was care for the care pro. The idea was that if we created a great job for them and took care of them, that they would then take better care of older adults.
There's a lot there I want to come back to, but let me start with another point, and I'm curious if this was part of your first company, but you've also adopted core values. We have core values at the Attorney General's office, which is we're principled, we do the right thing, we're public servants, we serve the public, we're innovative, and we're better together, we're collaborative. And that was literally from day one. I said we need our mission, which is together we serve Colorado, advancing the rule of law, protecting our democracy, and promoting justice for all. We need our values. You had your mission, you adopted values. Care starts with connection. Great solutions demand empathy. When you grow, we grow, and our differences propel us. Why did you adopt core values, and what was your process for doing so?
Yeah. So, okay. If you all are early stage founders or you want to go found a company, one of the things that you just must lock into your head right now is your team is the company. Full stop. If your team walks out the door today, do you have a company? The answer is no, right? All things cease to occur. And so there's a threshold that's a very well-known threshold, which is in Silicon Valley, which is 20 employees. Pre-20 employees, when you're working your way up to 20 employees, information transmits by osmosis internally. Everyone's on the same page. everyone knows what's going on, everyone knows what to do. And you get to that 21st employee, and you guys know who Max Levchin is? He's the founder of a firm. He was a co-founder of PayPal. So Max and I, he's an investor in Honor. We go biking together. He's much faster than I am, much, much, much faster, and does not have an off switch. So we're talking about this, and he's like, yep, it's 21. And in 21, information no longer transmits by osmosis. And you need to have internal processes in order to keep your team on the same page. What are we working toward? What matters? How do you make a decision when I'm not there? How do I empower you as one of my team members to know what to do and know how to drive the company forward without me? And so these core values are really important because they are part of establishing those norms internally, right? Now, there's one in there that I really want to talk about for a second, and it's like unbelievably critical to startup success. Our differences propel us. Okay. I was the weird kid in high school who sat with a bunch of kids who frankly did not look like me. They didn't talk like me. In fact, a lot of them were from other countries. But that made me weird in my high school. My high school had a bunch of international students, but mostly the international students sat over there, the students from America sat over here. But I sat over on that side. And as I just kept getting older, I always found myself hanging out with people who really fundamentally were not like me. My best friends were computer engineers. I cannot write a line of code. When I went to start a company, I had built-in friends who knew how to do stuff that I don't know how to do. But then I knew how to do stuff that they didn't know how to do. And later today, if any of you are also attending the Den AI conference, we're going to flip this, and I'm going to be interviewing literally one of my first hires at Honor, Phaedra Ellis Lampkins. And when I was interviewing her, her background was labor organizing, and then she came from the media industry, and she ran Prince, and then she was interviewing for running basically care at Honor, and I asked her some question. I don't remember what I asked her, but she literally laughed for like 30 seconds, and then she looks at me and she goes, "You are so ivory tower." And she got the job, right? Because I knew that she would know better than I would how to work with and propel forward the care professionals, because she had deep background in that area, and I would learn from her and she would learn from us. And today she's the founder, we're $1 billion company. She's got $1 billion company too now, because she learned tech from us. We learned how to help care pros from her. It was awesome. We ultimately both won, and all of our customers won too. So you all just need to really fundamentally understand, you have to find and partner with people who are different from you. That makes you as a team stronger.
All right, that's one of your core values. How'd you come up with empathy as a core value?
Okay. This is not the answer you're expecting.
I'm no expectation.
One of your jobs. So we are now 650 HQ employees. We have like 5,000 total employees in the company. We're literally in every state. We're the biggest in the United States. We're the biggest home care provider in the United States, United Kingdom, Canada. We're very large now. I'm still the CEO. And you have to ask yourself why, right? I'm a founding CEO, and oftentimes founding CEOs step down, leave, don't scale. And it turns out, I think, that one of the most important kind of precepts I have about myself is that I always have to find other people who are better at everything I do than I am. And I try to hire them, and I try to have them run that function, and I try to learn from them. And I'm constantly in the mode of what's called top grading. It's an Amazon term, which is I'm always trying to improve the team and make it better. You need to know what you're just weak at, and then you need to know what you are strong at, but there are probably other people who are even better than you are, and you eventually hire them. Empathy is an interesting one, because I have good meta empathy, but I have bad tactical empathy. So I really, really care about care pros and older adults and making the world a better place. That's a form of empathy. But I don't come across when I'm in like a meeting with a team, I'm like, what are we doing? How are we getting this done? And like, that's awesome. We've solved that problem. Okay, great, it's solved. Who cares? Forget about it. Let's just figure out the next thing that we have to go solve. That's me when I'm like in driving mode. So I know I am weak at tactical empathy. And so therefore, from like day one, I needed to hire people and have people on the team who were good at tactical empathy. And so it became a core value of the company, right? Because we needed to make sure that we compensated for my weakness by ensuring that the rest of the team knew we have to be empathetic internally because we are doing fundamentally care as a company.
So you might have a core value because it's core to who you are. You might have a core value because it's aspirational you want to be, or you might have a core value to remind you what you need. We have a core value in our ecosystem. Brad Feld's phrase is give first. He used to say give before you get, and give first, which is mean when someone here is going to come up to you afterwards, Seth, and ask for mentoring, you're not thinking, well, what do I get out of it? You're thinking, how do I help everyone be successful? That's part of what I would call a win-win mindset. When everyone here wins, we all win. We all want to celebrate each other's successes. That's not necessarily the core value of every entrepreneurial ecosystem. I think it's part of our secret sauce. I actually have heard a lot about the Bay Area. There's a lot of competitiveness, which is people are saying, oh, if you're succeeding, then I'm failing. Can you contrast those two mindsets?
Yeah. So I think like the human default is zero sum. By which I mean, you get $1, I lost the opportunity to get that dollar, it's a zero. There's $1 in the world, it's zero sum. And the amount to which people operate in a zero sum way is like nearly staggering to me. And I think it is like deeply, deeply the wrong way to think and operate, especially if you want to go change the world for the better, like if that's a goal of yours. Because zero sum literally means I have to take from you to win. And that's a hard psychology to make the world better with, right? I actually have to make you worse off if I want to win. So what's really cool that I think people miss about technology broadly is technology is one of the few things that we found a long time ago now that has the property that when you do it right and you deploy it right, it lets you serve more people with a better product cheaper. Think about those three things. More people with a better product cheaper. So that means by writing technology, you can actually improve the world for multiple groups of people because you're making things more efficient through that cheaper part, and yet you're giving them an actually fundamentally better product. Right? Now it becomes win-win as a default. And one of the things that you will struggle with any startup you try to run or build, is that you will just so often come against or up against people or will try to work with people who do not have that fundamental default thinking of, since this is a technology-based company, it can fundamentally be win-win. One of your friends in this, interestingly, are the top-tier venture capitalists. The top-tier venture capitalists all understand exactly what I just said. That is the reason why they're willing to take the risks that they do, and is the reason why they get the outcomes that they get. Because they actually can invest in companies that basically create this magic of more people served with a better product for less money. And so they're creating money out of thin air for their funds. So that is like the thing you have to find. You want to launch a product that has that property, and note that it is a reason why you actually have to be a tech company, right? If you say you're a tech company, don't like say it but not really have the technology that's actually improving something. You have to really have the technology that has those three properties.
Speaking of technology and your later panel on AI, this technology is obviously generating a lot of reactions, a lot of different reflections. As you think about how we as a society approach AI and how you're using AI in your company, what's on your mind?
Oh my God. Okay. AI. So the first thing I want to make sure that we all in this room like understand, 'cause I think you all do, but I'm going to say it anyway. Honor figured out in 2016 that if we did not use AI, we would have to shut the company down. In fact, we thought we were going to have to shut the company down because we were at like a $10 million run rate at that point, and we were falling apart at the seams. Everything was breaking. And basically it came down to the problem was humans are heterogeneous. Like Mrs. Smith, the older adult, liked Janet, the care pro, but then Mrs. Jones hated Janet, the care pro. Is Janet a good care pro or a bad care pro? And it turns out Janet is good for some people and bad for other people. And guess what's impossible to solve that problem with other than the human brain? You can't solve it with static algorithms. You can only solve it in AI. Right? It has to be a probability-based system based on lookalikes where you think about each individual's characteristics and then derive who is probabilistically the right person for them. Okay, so AI has been around for like quite a while in production, but all of a sudden AI has become a really hot topic because now there's generative AI, right? Which launched about OpenAI made it kind of widely known about a year and a half ago now that there's this form of AI that people can really understand because it's machine learning, but it's like not geeky statistics machine learning, I can talk to it. And this is creating one part euphoria, one part absolute fear, right? And the reality is, the truth, like always, is somewhere in the middle. So on the euphoria side, I think it is absolutely correct that companies that harness generative AI, even more than before when they were doing serve more people with a better product cheaper, they're going to hyper accelerate. And if you are a company or a nation that is not winning in AI, you will be losing because your competitor will be using AI and they will be serving more people with a better product cheaper than you are. America needs to win at AI. If we don't win at AI, other people, other countries will.
China.
China will win. And that would be a very bad place to be, both in terms of serving our own population, in terms of the state of our economy for how much we can, provide services to people, and even in warfare. Right? Because you can see today, warfare is becoming more and more AI, and you need to be able to win a war or have everybody believe you would win a war so that you don't have war, right? That's the goal, like scare people into not attacking. Okay, so AI is really important to win in. The people who have fear, what I hear a lot is one part, oh my God, it could kill jobs. And another part, I'm really scared about the potential for AI to discriminate accidentally, right? It got loaded with the wrong training data, and so therefore, it discriminated against, any given group of people.
Mrs. Jones.
Mrs. Jones. Okay. In terms of taking jobs away, we have seen historically again and again and again and again that when we create technologies that do rote operations that people can do, but people don't have to do, that labor from those people gets redistributed into higher value functions, and we increase the size of our economy. The Industrial Revolution was hard, right? These things are societally hard. These are difficult transitions to go through. But we ended up with the strongest economy in the world, which meant that we had the best quality of life effectively in the world, because we used and harnessed this newfound technology that did have the effect of taking away certain jobs, but creating all new sorts of jobs over there. And I think what we're going to see with AI is it's going to play out the same way, right? Now, what we see in AI is we see an opportunity to make care pros' lives dramatically better. I'll give you an example. We ran into the problem that care pros would tell us, I don't want to work on Saturdays. So we interview them. Hey, when do you want to, one part of the interview would be when they're onboarding, right? When do you want to work? Well, I don't want to work Saturdays. And we observed for the longest time that there was this weird thing that would happen, which is the same day that a care pro said they did not want to work on Saturdays, we would then put 5 potential clients in front of them. And they would very often pick a client who had Saturday on their schedule. And we were like, why are you choosing this client when they have the Saturday on their schedule that you did not want? And the answer turned out to be some kind of exception. Well, they live close to me, or well, like my daughter actually gets out of school at like that time, and so I can make the schedule work, or whatever it is. There's always a reason. At low scale, that means you can talk to a care pro and give them a better job, because you can actually give them something on a Saturday that works really well for them and the client. At high scale, if the client, without AI, if the care pro says no Saturdays, there's just never a Saturday. But with AI, there can be Saturdays for that care pro, right? The right Saturdays for them. And this pattern repeats again and again. What's the right home to put a care pro in so that they have the best experience, because we're putting them into a home that have the right needs for their skill sets, right? Would be another really great example. Or how can we best route a care pro so that that care pro drives the least amount possible and spends the most time with actual clients helping them. All of these things AI can do and make the lives of care pros better. Last thought on AI around discrimination, because this is important. Today there are laws, multiple laws, federal level, state level, that say in all sorts of different ways, companies are not allowed to discriminate. And good actor companies don't discriminate, right? But here's the thing. When we do things based on humans, we are relying upon those good actor companies to train those humans, and for each individual human to remember their training, and for each individual human to act ethically and follow that training. And the problem is that that does not always occur with humans. And then what companies do that are good actor companies is they have processes to find aberrations, right? They have a process to find, one of my humans over here is doing something that they should not be doing, and so I'm going to go try to work with them and retrain them, and if that doesn't work, because it turns out that they're always doing something not good, I'm going to ask them to leave the company. That's the way we do it in human space. The thing about AI that's amazing is that for that thing, let's say evaluating an application from a candidate, you can train it to evaluate every single person who applies in exactly the same way. There is no human bias any longer. You must still run the process that you were running when it was run by human, right? You still have to run the process of making sure that the outputs, right, are good and are not biased and are not discriminating. But if you have that process, and if you're constantly making that algorithm better, what's amazing is you can get rid of human bias on these kinds of decisions. And that actually ends up in a much more just system. So I understand the fear that people have around AI potentially discriminating, but people forget that people discriminate too, right? And the question is, which system is easier to make non-discriminatory? And I think that it is actually much easier to make an AI system not discriminate than to make 100 humans or 1,000 humans on a given team, right? Think about it. If I said to you, go train 1,000 humans, do you think all 1,000 humans will do the same thing and treat every candidate the same way? No way, right? But the machine can.
All right, couple quick points. I'm going to get questions from the audience. You promised this was coming. What are the negatives of entrepreneurship?
All right. So to start, I'm going to talk about specifically the negatives on doing a social good company. Let me tell you, I'm going to first say, what are the obvious positives? It will warm your heart. It will give you the energy to go every day. You will be able to hire better people than you would otherwise be able to hire. We have benefited from this throughout our entire history. We have always been able to punch above our weight in terms of the caliber of the people that we can hire. Because if you tell someone, hey, you get to make the world a better place, and you get to potentially make money if this company works, that attracts many more people. Those are the positives. The negatives are two, so be ready for this. Negative number one is every startup has a trough of despair. Raise your hand, who knows this term? Trough of despair for startups? Not enough. So basically, almost always you launch, things are going great, kind of euphoria, but then something always goes wrong. You're not growing as fast as you wanted to, your economics aren't closing, your servers aren't scaling, like whatever it is, something always goes wrong. And you have to get through that trough of despair where you have to figure out what's going wrong and how to get the company back on track. And understand, like my contemporaries in Silicon Valley that launched their first companies when I did are like Mark at Facebook and like Chad and Steve at YouTube. Blah. Every single one of those companies had a trough of despair. Facebook stopped growing for a long time. YouTube was going to get sued out of existence by the record labels. Like every company has its trough of despair, without exception. And on world change companies, the trough of despair is usually longer and harder, right? Because it's trying to do something really big and make a really big difference. And when it tries to do something that big and make a really big difference, it's a harder trough to fight out of. So that's thing number one. Thing number two, this is weird, but I've discovered it's real. You are going to be really depressed when you discover that there are a bunch of people out there who try to stop you. You're going to be like, what the hell? I'm doing this world change company. I'm trying to make the lives of older adults better. I'm trying to make the lives of care pros better, whatever your version of that is. How could this person or this group be trying to do something that slows us down or stops us? And the answer is that no matter how good a thing you're trying to do for the world, and I'll bet you see this every day in your world, no matter how good it is, there are going to be groups of vested interest that do not want you to succeed. Because you are making the world, and it's somehow making the existing thing that kind of sort of functions, but keeps the world being not such a great place. Those people working on that are going to try to stop you. And so that is pretty depressing, because you're kind of like, how could you be working against this? It's so clearly better for humanity if this works.
It's notable, we're talking about your second company, where you had a clear mission, you had core values, you had a commitment doing that was for good. Talk about what it means to be a first-time entrepreneur, where you're probably less secure, you're more afraid. How do you hold on to these mindsets without the security of having succeeded, maybe have a little bit of a nest egg? It's going to be harder if you're having more on the line personally than if you're already a successful entrepreneur doing it a second time.
Yeah. So one thing that's interesting is if you look at my friends, who when I go back to Silicon Valley, I go on bike rides with. That's kind of what we do. They're almost all second-time founders. And almost all of them, their second company is a world change company, often in healthcare in one way, shape, or form. Because they're benefiting from this second time, or I made some money, I am secure in my own life, and so therefore I'm going to put all my eggs in this crazy basket over here that might not work, but screw it, I'm going to do it because I want to make the world a better place. For first-time founders, you need to work on a problem where you can show some kind of early traction and attract basically investor and other employee interest. And so that just has to be a property of what you work on. Okay, so if you're working on a thing that you think can make the world a better place and it can make a lot of money, there has to be a way where you can launch a first thing that does not require $10 million up front, right? It's gotta have kind of, I could launch it on like $1 million in seed money, and I can show enough success to get that next like $7 million Series A. Now, two things to think about when you launch that thing and what that thing should be. That base level thing that you build needs to kind of be a platform where if you see that you can build it and succeed at actually making that thing work, you know in your head, I can then plug a couple of other things on top of it. And once I do that, I'm on my path to changing the world for the better. So you want to build the platform level thing first, is the way I would think about it, if you can, so that once you do kind of succeed at showing that you can make that happen and attracting investors, you can then start plugging other things on top of it. The other way to do it is you build one singular application that would sit on top of it. And maybe that's easier to build, and that's okay as long as it's a singular application. But then you need to know how you're going to take that application that you built that was easy to build because you couldn't raise $20 million on a napkin. And then you're going to build a platform underneath it once you have more money. And from there, you then do other offshoots to do a real world change kind of company.
All right, we got a few minutes for questions. I'll repeat it. Yes, and please introduce yourself too.
Hello, my name is Ariel Loring.
Yeah.
I'm a social good founder, technical founder, so I'm bootstrapping a bartering app right now. Actually, I'm really excited to ask you this question, Seth. Not only as a social good founder, but actually as a former Googler too. You're probably familiar with Tristan Harris, who went on to found the Center of Humane Technology. And who released a 200-ish page PowerPoint to Google to take accountability for the attention span they're taking from people and calling on big tech to do the same. So my question is this: how do you balance founding a social good company with the other evils that facilitate it, such as, social media that is capturing the attention, or maybe features that capture a lot of attention?
This is a point we could have a whole nother session on. For those who don't know who Tristan is, watch the movie The Social Dilemma, and you'll get a sense of his view. There's a lot there to comment on, so go ahead, Seth.
Okay.
No, it's great.
I love this question. So first of all, Tristan, I cannot remember if Tristan was on my team or if he was adjunct to my team when I was at Google, but literally I worked with him at Google all the time. So I know him super well. Here's the thing that's really important that I see employees and other people out in the kind of, markets lose sight of. When you're working on change the world to be fundamentally better, you have to have kind of a net value equation in your head of, if I do this, but there are these other externalities that might be negative, did I net move things forward? Or are those externalities outweighing what I'm doing and I'm actually moving the world backward? And that is literally the way I think about it. So I'll hear, for example, a suggestion from an employee internally, and it'll often be, because we're very, very into care for the Care Pro. So often an employee will say, hey, what if we introduced this new benefit or this new feature for a Care Pro? And they'll be thinking about it as just that one benefit or feature. And they're not thinking about it in the global ecosystem of all of the benefits and features that we build for Care Pros. And when you look at that one benefit, it's like, oh, that one singular thing actually has this substantial fault in it that would really take down the entire system. So I know it seems good, but it would actually hurt the ecosystem of basically projects and opportunities that we've created for the Care Pros. And so we say no, even if it individually seems good. So what you have to do is you have to think for whatever project you're working on, there's almost nothing that doesn't have some kind of negative externality. Like, we use servers, right? Servers have economic or environmental impact. You can come up with lots of reasons why something is partially bad. But as long as if you add up the value equation and you say, at net, am I truly improving the world? Of course, with some great stuff and some stuff that's not so great, then that's a worthy thing to do because you have actually moved us in total forward. If people hold themselves to a standard of literally there can be nothing that is wrong in my ecosystem, you won't ever do anything. Because that actually does not exist. There are always some kinds of costs.
We've got time for one more, if that's okay. One more question?
Sure, and
All right.
here,
Oh,
wherever you want, you pick.
go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Hi there, my name is Melissa Lynn. Thank you so much for all that great information. I just wanted to see if you know of any particular VCs that invest in world change type of companies, and in particular environmental.
So there are a ton of VCs that do. So VCs like World Change, they are fearful of that elongated trough of despair. They all know that. Environmental's super hot. So Mike Schrepphofer, who I don't remember the names of the funds, I just know the people. But Mike Schrepphofer, who was the founding CTO, basically the founding CTO, first 2 years of Facebook, He's now got an environmental-based VC fund. Chris Saka, Mike Schrepphofer. Chris Saka is another one who has an environmental fund. He was one of the early Google people. So if you do a search, you will find lots of VCs that are new age, kind of new VCs that are very specifically working on environment.
And here in Colorado, Ruben. What's that? Sorry, I understand. Ruben, look up Ruben Munger here in Colorado. Munger, Munger. And good luck. Can we give Seth a huge round of applause for coming to Colorado and joining us here today?
And Phil. Phil is, I just want to say, Phil is one of the first people that really helped me understand Colorado for real and get involved here. So a huge thank you to Phil for all that he's done for me and the state of Colorado.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you so much, Seth. The Denver Startup Week road continues. These guys were absolutely awesome. They might stick around for a few minutes if you have some quick questions for them. But one last big round of applause for Phil and Seth. These guys just absolutely rocked the house. Thank you. Next up, we have David Cohen talking about from Boulder to the world, the history story of Techstars and what's future and what's next. And he's going to be interviewed by the one and only Victor Wang for the CEO and founder of Right to Start. So stick around, stick around, stick around. It just gets better. You're the best.